Sup gamers, hello, and welcome to a sort of offhand commentary about the recent patch that came out, the 9.6.0 PTB. I know that I said that I wouldn't be back for a while after my last video, which thank you by the way for the support on that. I have enough time to get this general commentary out, and I wanted to talk about why this patch might feel underwhelming to a lot of people. That's been the general reaction that I have seen, that it seems like it is a patch without a lot of content, but actually I think that in terms of a PTB patch, the point of the patch isn't the balance changes. The point of the patch is more of the baseline gameplay features, because after 2025, I feel like Dead by Daylight and behavior in general are trying to recover a lot of their foundation in order to build up into something a little bit more. Now, I do think that they are taking a little bit long on some of this, and we'll get into talking about that first. But let's also talk about the 9.6.0 patch and what it brings about. The first thing, the most people have noticed, obviously with it being the top of the page is these diminishing returns. I don't know why my accent came from there, but it's this diminishing returns update, right? Where, while in a trial, repeated positive or negative gameplay modifiers and status effects are now affected by diminishing returns. Identical modifiers granted by powers, items, perks, and offerings, which I think is a bit of a weird inclusion. I don't think offerings should be included in this, because that would be like, what, BP can't stack anymore? As if blood points aren't already enough of a grind. I don't think that offering should be included in this, and I don't think there's any other offerings, aside from the murky reagents maybe, that shouldn't stack. And even then, those are you bring a stack of, maybe they're thinking salty lips or something for luck stacking, but that also seems rather strange to target. Anyway, modifiers granted from killer powers and survivor item add-ons are excluded from diminishing returns. So this is pretty much exactly what I was talking about in my last Dead by Daylight related video essay, which was how diminishing returns could be implemented in such a way that you're not harmfully stacking a whole bunch of things. So gameplay prioritizes the highest values and then reduces the impact of lesser ones, which is great. And then dev notes, the ability of killers and survivors to stack modifiers indefinitely as enabled ever accelerating and more intense gameplay. We aim to normalize how modifiers from different sources interact against each other, and all major gameplay modifiers and status effects for both roles are included in this update. This change will help us as developers create new interesting powers, items, and perks, which is pretty much exactly what I was thinking, along the lines of diminishing returns. But I do know there are some people that are unhappy with this. Here's JRM saying that the diminishing returns update feels like the foundation of the beginning of the end for fun builds in Dead by Daylight, which was what we had argued about a year ago, pretty much literally a year ago, when they said that they were going to remove haste stacking. And then you can even see I even included some top responses here to his tweet of people saying it's good between balancing nothing allowing you to stack the perk to the roof, and I don't see what's fun in facing a Mars with 40% haste. Totally agree. Pixelbush asks, which fun builds are no longer possible with this change? Well, no more super healing builds, I guess, but already healing perks are really problematic for the pace of the game, because they speed a lot of things up, and haste stacking's a big problem for survivors, to face, because again, what's fun in facing a Mars with 40% haste? He just flies around the back of a pallet. Yippee, you have no chance to outlive him unless you have a god pallet to throw in, and then it's just gone immediately. There's no interaction there. And then Zath having a slug to survive. So a lot of people, disagree with JRM here, but that is some part of the communal sentiment. And here's also Altairi, who I believe, you'll have to forgive me, I'm not very good at reading Central or Eastern European languages quite as well. I believe is a Polish streamer. I'm not too familiar with this person, unfortunately, but they're in the creator program, and I saw them, when we're all discussing the changes to the chapter. This is one of the criticisms. Again, don't like the diminishing return system, doesn't change the meta at all, and only discourages from fun builds and potentially introduces another balancing nightmare. I think that it reduces the chances of a balancing nightmare, because now you don't have to worry about haste stacking anymore. And if we go down as well, Mint Skull actually replied to this and talked about how, there's very little changes in terms of the time. This is, whole paragraphs. Again, I've talked about this in my video as well. or about like why diminishing returns would be good for the game in my video, and Minschool is pretty much, repeating what I had said there. Like, yeah, it'll take till 2030 because, behavior's patch pace is really slow. And that there were a lot of balance changes with the system. But I think that the reason why we're not seeing so many balance changes with this system presently is because we need to understand how the system works and how it feels and what adjustments need to be made. Because when we go back here and we have 100% of modifier, and then the second value then takes 50% and then 25%, and so it gradually goes down the list, you eventually are running into games where it's like, okay, maybe the second one should be 75% instead of 50%, and then this should be 40%. Buff these up so that it doesn't feel quite as bad to stack these things. This is the point of the PTB, right? That's the point of the player test build, is to see like maybe these are like overreaching and we could bump some of these modifiers up. But the point still being that, this later thing here will help them create new interesting powers, items, and perks without having to worry about them getting stacked and everything. There was one more thing I wanted to show on diminishing returns. I just remembered, I pulled up a clip. But one of the weird things about diminishing returns is that apparently it also includes effects from the opposing sides. Polyester was someone who brought attention to this, linking this video specifically. But you can see from, Shadow Cyrax here, where you have Self-Care, which gives you 35% reduced healing, and then Coulrophobia, which gives you 50% reduced healing as well. Now, normally, if you are 50% reduced healing and you're healing at 35% speed, it would take you 1 minute and 31 seconds if you're inside of Coulrophobia. But because the game does not separate the values right away, and instead is just all healing speeds, and then the one with the lesser value gets a diminished return in terms of healing speed, you actually heal faster in the PTB with Self-Care when the killer brings an anti-heal perk. And I'm assuming that, Coulrophobia is not going to be the only exception for this. Of course, they don't, have examples quite yet for, let's say, Weeping Wounds / Gift of Pain, Thanatophobia, Sloppy Butcher, all that sort of stuff. And so in PTB, because the Coulrophobia or the Self-Care has a diminishing return, you actually heal 30 seconds faster with Self-Care because of that diminishing return change. Later on as well, they have an example here showing when you use Overclock. Here, let me turn the audio down just a little bit so it's not so loud. But when you use Overclock as the singularity into a chemical trap, normally the chemical trap slows you down by 50%, and then the pallet break also slows you down by 50%. I think it's usually like some 80% slow previously, or maybe 100%. I'm not entirely sure. But when you break it now, and you walk into it, it gives you a 62.5% hinder. Because it's taking the 50% hinder from one effect, and then diminishing the other effect by a percentage, a smaller percentage. And then they also showed this really interesting one that I had never even considered, which is basically that when you get the item from Vecna that gives you the Mage Hand haste, and then are running fixated, normally you get 20% for fixated and then 7% for the Mage Hand haste. But then when he uses Mage Hand and you have fixated, you now have 23.5% because the 7% from the Mage Hand haste is a diminished return. So these are like really weird examples. There's so many variables in Dead by Daylight that I don't think you could really ever account for everything in this patch, to be honest with you. So there's like weird exceptions for sure to be considered here. But on a whole, I think that this is a system that is going to be healthy for Dead by Daylight going forward. And instead of trying to stack an unhealthy mechanic together, it instead encourages you to bring one perk and then diversify your build to then center around it from there. Some people were also saying that this is kind of an underwhelming system because it doesn't do anything to target the already meta perks, and I agree. You're still going to see Windows Opportunity every game. You're still going to see Sprint Burst, Vigil almost every game. I've seen Lithe and Resilience quite a bit too. I see like my top 4 perks, if I remember correctly, in the 106 games that 106, 107 games that I've played in the last couple months, um, are Windows, Resilience, Live, Deja Vu. That's like the four most common perks that I run into, with Windows having more than one appearance per game. So that's, you know, something to consider. And diminishing returns doesn't do anything to target it, but I also think that you can't really do diminishing returns on Windows Opportunity. That just needs, well, doesn't need, but it would require, if you didn't want it to be as prevalent, a direct nerf, or for people to just learn the game, which I've already talked about as well in my perk variety situation video. Anyway, that's diminishing returns is kind of the initial thoughts on it. Progress bar update and visible team perks, and then like some spectator mode and aura customization. The reason I'm just kind of breezing over these is because a lot of these are quality of life things. Now, I do think some people were saying that, oh, but if it's previously when the bar was red when you were repairing a generator with somebody else because the efficiency was lower, now the bar will be yellow because you're actually repairing it faster, which might encourage people to double up on generators more. And you don't want to do that. Yellow is not always good, which is kind of confusing in that way. But I think this change is nice. Like, I still think that regardless of everything else, this change just kind of helps with overall clarity for new players. If it's yellow, it's going faster. If it's red, it's going slower because of some effect that your target is suffering in some way. I think that's something that it kind of needs to be considered as. Maybe that's something that we could teach new Dead by Daylight players is like, hey, just because it's going faster doesn't mean that you're being efficient. And I think that goes into teaching people about macro play as well, which I might, within the next month or so, whenever I have time now, make a video about how to play the macro in Dead by Daylight. And then we have visible team perks, which is nice, really good solo queue effect. I'm glad that this doesn't show in the lobby, because I think that people might dodge lobbies where they see that people are equipping perks that they don't personally like. I'm glad that this is showing in-game and understanding like, oh, that person has Deliverance, or oh, that person has Will Make It. I should let that person get unhooks. Now, moving on to the most controversial segment, which is the killer updates. Now, the biggest changes overall were how the Blight's default movement speed went down to 4.4 meters per second, which is a change that I have advocated for before. But now, breaking it down palette now reduces Sean Connery reduces rush tokens down to 2 below maximum. So you get like an extra 4 seconds for a survivor to get away to your next palette, your next loop. But then Blight still is high tier anyway. This changes not like, it changes his power for sure. It makes him weaker, it makes him more counterable, makes it so that the resources that you use in the game are more reasonable uses of resources than was before. Like previously you would burn a pallet and the Blight would break it and then they just catch up to you 3 seconds later anyway. So now getting that extra little buffer where when you do use a pallet, and if you time it correctly with a Blight break, whoa, suddenly you have the ability to get away. And he's 4.4, so he can't like really walk at you as fast anymore. Which is, it's significant. I think that we're going to be feeling this change, especially with people who aren't quite as adept with the Blight, but I still think the Blight is good. Because, the power, the mobility, losing 4 seconds off of your cooldown. Oh, how terrible, how terrifying. I had previously maintained that he should lose 10 seconds. I had previously maintained that if he breaks a pallet or whatever, he should just lose all of his tokens. But I can understand that would be too harsh, so I think this is a good change. Demogorgon, I'm going to skip over a couple of these for now because I want to go back around to this point later. Demogorgon got changed to have increased movement speed, has, over double the undetectable coming out of the portal, which is cool. Increased churn rate, which is nice because then it allows you to make those little last second adjustments around things and makes the power a little bit less restrictive in that way, which is nice. Mastermind, Wesker got decreased recovery time, decreased charge time, and then increase the duration of the chain bound window so you don't have to rely on egg quite as much for this, especially after they made the physics change where he gets stuck on everything like a glue trap now. Um, so seeing these changes kind of feels nice as compensation for how he just kind of gets caught on everything now. And then Unknown, decreases the cooldown by 0.75 seconds and decreases the vision linger duration by 0.5 seconds, which is great. Gives you a little more time as the Unknown to land follow-up shots, because now people can't, like, view you through a wall and then they still have, like, a 1.25 second buffer. It's, like, down a half second. And so actually using cover around the map and tiles and playing little mind games and things like that becomes more of a viable strategy than it was before, because you don't have as long of a linger anymore. And then animatronic had a couple of decreased cooldowns for the fire axe. I think these are the two most important lines here. And then now key binding for grab axe button updated to use power input. So now it uses your right click instead of your left click, which makes it so that you're less susceptible to eat a dead hard when a survivor does that, which is, I think this is a really quietly really good buff for the animatronic instead of M1ing. And then decrease battery consumption. I mean, this does nothing. Survivors don't use cameras already, and they're not going to now. And then add-on updates, nurses, heavy panting. 30% was ridiculous distance of a lunge on an already high tier killer, so that just kind of gave her way too much flexibility. So reducing that down to 10%, that's fine. I think that's great. Now, the thing that I don't like is when they do this shit with add-on updates otherwise. So initially, the changes that they made to the other killers that are listed in here are so incremental, so teeny tiny. So you increase the maximum chainsaw sweep speed to 5.45 meters per second. You increase it by 0.1 meters per second, which can make a difference in short loops here and there. I think people will be feeling this, and they didn't actually change any of Bubba's add-ons, so you can, with Beast Marks, actually clear quite a bit of distance with this. This 0.1 meters per second does actually make a little bit of a difference. But then Ghostface, decrease the cooldown by 2 seconds. The reason Ghostface is weak is not because his cooldown is 17 seconds. Decrease the delay of shock therapy by 50 milliseconds. The reason why Doctor is weak and underplayed is not because of the delay by 50 milliseconds. And then Dredge, increase movement speed while charging Reign of Darkness by 0.2 meters per second. The reason why the Dredge is weak is not a difference of 0.2 meters per second. There's, this does make mind games around pallets a little bit easier, I guess, but the counterplay to Dredge is holding W away. I think that if you really did want to buff the Dredge, you would make it so that there was less of that movement speed penalty for disabling the Remnant. I think that's something that would benefit the killer greatly, because then if somebody just leaves the tile and you're quick enough to react to it, then you wouldn't be punished for canceling Remnant early, and you would be able to keep up with people a little bit better and play around tiles. Skull Merchant got new icons. Okay. The killer still kind of sucks. And then they change all these things. They make animatronic feel better to play. They make Ghostface lose 2 seconds, whatever. But then they're like, oh, now because we've decreased the cooldown, we gotta nerf the add-on as well, which is something that I complained about this a while ago, where I said, like, why does everything need to have a compensatory nerf? Why is it that when we have these D-tier killers like the Ghostface, who recently I played a game against, and poor Ghostface got like 5 hooks the entire game on Mother's Dwelling, why are we making his add-ons obsolete? Mastermind's add-ons, the virulent bound, chain-bound windows increased. Why are we making the add-on worse? Why are we making the add-on obsolete again? The decreased time when embedded in the environment to 6 seconds, down by 16%. Oh, but we also have to nerf the restaurant menu. And we have to, access panel buff, sure. But, like, We have to nerf the restaurant menu now. It's like, this is the test build. Why are we making compensatory nerfs to the add-ons and making the add-ons obsolete when we make little quality of life changes to the killer overall? Like, what's the point of that? You're just making it so that the add-on is worse to run now overall. I'm going to tab through a couple of my windows here, right? Like, when the reason why this patch feels disappointing, and a lot of people have said like, wow, this is such a nothing burger patch, is because when there was the community stream that happened a little bit ago, you know, killer update, nerfs, blight, this is like a huge set of nerfs, you know, nerfing one of her strongest, if not her strongest overall add-on. And we thought, sick. When you have diminishing returns, which was like an idea that kind of came around, and then some, you know, quality of life things. And we see, you know, blight with all of these sweeping changes on the community stream. We assume the blight, oh man, the nurse got like a massive change as well to one of her best add-ons. Surely every other killer gets a massive buff in the same way, or, you know, has a couple of sweeping changes. The Demogorgon and the Unknown, sure, great changes. But then 50 milliseconds off the doctor's delay. It's nothing. that's actually nothing. Like, again, nobody's playing the doctor because they're wishing, oh man, I wish I had, if I had 50 milliseconds off of my shock delay cooldown, man, this killer would be so much better to play. It's not a sentence that's uttered by anybody. People are still going to be running double discipline add-ons with this killer, or like discipline plus range, because there are other things that are already wrong with this killer that need to be touched up anyway. And that's why this patch feels so underwhelming, is because the expectation was big sweeping change that made this killer weaker. Not significantly, but weaker. Big change that made this killer weaker. And then you get every other killer in here, aside from maybe Demogorgon and Unknown, and a little bit of the animatronic, and even then the animatronic Springtrap gets a compensatory nerf to the add-on that was adjusted with this. Like, why are we doing this? Again, why are we nerfing add-ons when we're making something base kit? Just keep the add-on. It's the test build. Nerf the add-on afterwards if it's problematic. If not, keep it as is. The animatronic's already suffering enough at this point in time. And on top of that, like with all these killer changes, with them being super underwhelming and people being like, oh, this patch does nothing, because I think really the main point is the diminishing returns. That's going to be a lot of the bulk of what they're looking at right now. You know, why does this feel underwhelming for killer tweaks? Well, I went through patch history, and I was looking through to see, you know, what were our previous killer changes? When was the last time that we really got killer changes? So, of course, you know, we have the all-kill comeback, which reworked the Trickster, changed him up quite a bit, and then like the little tweak afterwards. And then aside from that, we got some changes to the first, and some add-on adjustments, and a little bit of changes to the ghoul. So, you know, some like minor touch-ups. The first obviously getting changed quite a bit because he's the most recent killer. And that's because he's popular, kind of thing. So, okay, so some adjustments here to a popular killer. What was before that? Well, previous to that, we had a little tweak here to the Skull Merchant in December. It was 4 months ago. You look, okay, so he increased the undetectable duration to 8 seconds. And then you gain undetectable when recalling a drone instead. Whoops. You gain undetectable when recalling a drone instead. Okay, you know, that's a tweak. That's a change. 4 months ago, right? December 9th. This is live version. Well, what was the last change before that? Well, it was another tweak. This was like after Myers' rework. He can do full camera controls now with Slaughtering Strike. And we did some Skull Merchant buffs as well. Some slight changes because, you know, they didn't go through with the rework idea that they had initially with the Claymore Roomba, and they were just like, well, let's just, you know, increase some of her stats. Okay. Well, again, like 2 killers get tweaked. And that's it. That's it for killer updates. Okay, well, when was this patch? This patch was November, so this was like end of November, 4.5 months ago. Well, before that, the last time that we got a killer change was Sinister Grace, which was 7 months, well, 6.5 months ago. And that change, hold on, scrolling down, we had the rework for Myers. And then like some slight changes here and there to these killers in here. This was the nerf to the clown after we had like super haste clown. This was that nerf to the ghoul that made it so you didn't get like pallet kidnapped anymore. This was the change to Oni so that you just gain more blood orbs off of a hook. And then some like number changes to Dark Lord and some changes that just weirdly nerfed blurry photo for some reason, because, you know, we have to make compensatory nerfs whenever we buff something. And just made these add-ons worse, and so we've made them more obsolete. Well, okay. You know, some like little taps here and there. Again, this was 7 months ago, or 6.5 months ago. So when was the last time that we actually got like changes that really touched up on a weaker killer? The last time that we really got that change was during the Walking Dead patch 9 months ago, 8.5 months ago, 9 months ago. And that was when they reworked the Executioner's add-ons, kind of buffed his power a little bit here and there. And they did this like haste clown thing, and then they buffed the pig and buffed the knight. And that was it. This was the last time that we really got a collection of actually significant changes to killers that are not high tier. Was 8.5 months ago. That's why this patch feels so underwhelming. And if we look at, you know, all the killers that we have in Dead by Daylight, a lot of them haven't been touched in years now. And a lot of them also have increasingly game-breaking bugs. You know, we think of Deathslinger, for example, has a very frustrating bug right now, where when he is, this is a clip from somebody in the Deathslinger mains Discord, but when you hit a shot, right? So sharpshooter shot hits this person inside a shack. Let me turn this audio down just a little bit. It seems a bit loud. So you can see the shot is landed here. Touches, you know, it touches the tires here. Watch the chain meter. See how fast this is going now? See how fast that goes there? Right there. And that's because the chain, the game thinks that the chain is colliding with these tires on this player's left. This has been a bug since October. This has been a bug for 6 months now. And it screws her out of the hit. So, 6 months of that bug. A full year of the hit reg bugs. Hitbox bugs everywhere. Every time a map is updated or reintroduced, it gains a new hitbox. There's one on Family Residence where you can't shoot underneath the gazebos, the temple shrines, anymore. And every other killer has their bugs. I mean, there was a bug that I saw on Revium stream with the Trickster, where the survivor will permanently have like their generator repairing hitbox for the rest of the game, and you literally cannot hit them with knives. Or, most importantly, the Doctor, who Shy made a video, let me click back on, Shy made a video talking about, you know, the accessibility and how it's causing migraines. And even if it's not just Shy, I know somebody as well in the Deathslinger mains Discord by the name of Rose, who cannot play against the Doctor because it triggers her epilepsy. This killer has been a problem since April 2nd of 2025. It has been over a year since this bug that causes seizures, migraines, triggers epilepsy beyond the baseline expectation of Dead by Daylight. Now, I know that there's like, oh, there's an epilepsy warning at the start of the game. The epilepsy warning is there for what you expect with the other 41 killers in the game. Every other killer in the game does not give you the same treatment as the Doctor. So when you are hitting 1 out of 41 that gives you epilepsy, that's the one that's the problem. So you can't say, well, the epilepsy should be considered for everything. It's like, no, for the majority of the game that you play, you don't run into that issue at all. But now you are, because of a change that was made. When you have not had a significant set of changes to killers overall in 8.5 months, and you are led to believe, because of this change here, the Blight getting significant changes to their kit, that, wow, we get changes to the animatronic that might be in the same category. We get changes to the dredge that might be in the same category. Holy smokes, this is going to be the best patch ever. And then you find out, increase movement speed to 4 meters per second. Wow. They decreased the cooldown of Night Shroud by 2 seconds and then removed 1 second from Walleye's matchbook. That's what's disappointing. That's why this patch feels so underwhelming for a lot of people. And it's not at all because the ideas are bad, but it's because it feels like the expectations of what we were going to get with the killer updates have not been met, because this is very clearly a patch that is entirely focused on this update, which people already don't like anyway, because it's taking away, quote, fun builds. So, yeah, that's my general reaction to the diminishing returns update. I really wish that Deathslinger would get bug fixes, but there's no bug fixes here. It's been 6 months since we got our last bug fix mention, which, in case you're curious, was... Hold on. So yeah, it's not been 6 months, it's been 4.5 months since Slinger was even mentioned in a bug fix patch, and this patch did not fix it. This patch didn't fix it at all. This is still a bug presently. I just kind of wish that the level of expectations that were set, there we go, with this, that was then displayed here, was actually also met in the patch itself. And it simply wasn't. It's the diminishing returns update, it's the quality of life update, testing out newer customizations, that sort of thing. So I don't think we can view it as a killer update, really, aside from, like, Blight getting nerfed slightly, Demogorgon getting some change, which is okay, and then Animatronic getting a change, and Unknown getting a change, but then Animatronic add-on getting nerfed. That's my commentary, my overall reaction. Thanks for listening, fellas. This is just very offhand, not really scripted, just an idea. A little ramble, as you will. Not going to have a whole lot of editing in this, as you can imagine. And yeah, I'll see you when I do next. Take care. Bye-bye.